Hey everyone, welcome back to RetroBreak and welcome to something that I never thought I would be saying in my entire life. Welcome to my 40,000 subscriber special. It's just unbelievable the amount of support that you guys and girls have showed me over the past few years since I made my 10,000 subscribers video. It's just mind-blowing, and I am so grateful for every single one of your views, every single one of your subscriptions, and all the comments down below. It really is a joy to see so many people enjoying what I put so much time and effort into. So first of all, I just want to say a huge thank you to every single person out there who's ever watched any of my videos. I wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for you guys. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and onward to 50k. And now let's get into the meat of the video, which is my memories of the original Game Boy. And I've got some really cool stuff lined up for you in this episode, starting off with the complete in-box original Game Boy experience. And I bought this from a show recently just for this video, so let's take a look at what comes inside this brand new complete in-box Game Boy package. And the condition of everything in there is just insane. I'm so glad to add this to my collection, and it's just so nostalgic to be holding this like 30 years after I got my hands on my very first one. And that brings us on to the memories part of the episode, and I can't wait to get into this. So there was something else that I found just for this video, and this is actually my original one as well. So I had this giant carrying case here, and my parents lived about a 10-minute walk down the road from there, and the house that I'm in right now is actually the house that used to belong to my nan and granddad. And I would walk up the road every single day after school carrying this giant Game Boy carrying case, and I would sit downstairs below this room right here on the sofa, and I would be playing on my original Game Boy. And for this video in particular, they've all fallen out because it's kind of broken inside, but this is how I would carry everything with me. The games would be lined up here in their little protective packages, and the console would be right here. Here it is. But this is just so nostalgic, just holding this case that I had as a kid, and in here I've filled it up with all of my most nostalgic games from that era as well. So let's take a look at what games I chose here, and I'll tell you a bit about some of my childhood memories with them. Let's start with Bubble Bobble Part 2. This was a staple of mine back in school. I would play this every single day. I do actually have my original box for this game as well, and I've managed to keep it in immaculate condition for almost 30 years at this point, which is just amazing and is a prized possession, honestly. Maybe it's not everyone's first pick for a Game Boy game, it's not the game that everyone jumps to straight away, but for me, this was my childhood. I played this game more than anything else on the Game Boy, and at the time as well, I remember I even knew all of the different passwords to get to the different levels off by heart as well. And putting this game in and seeing that little intro cutscene with Bob or Bob going up in the little bubble up to the top of the screen before the first stage starts, and the little music that's playing, it's so nostalgic, and it just fills me with so many really happy memories. This was my first experience ever with the Bubble Bobble game as well, and even though it was called Part 2, at the time when I was like 4 years old or something, I didn't really understand what that meant, so I didn't even know that there was other games in this series. But obviously over the years I've been back and played a bunch more, but still this is the one that I always come back to, and the one that holds the most fondest memories for me. Next is Kirby's Dream Land, and this was the perfect game for me as a kid. It wasn't too difficult, and I could play through it in just a few hours, and I actually played this one through all the way to the end quite a lot, and I remember doing that cheat code at the end of the game to unlock the harder levels too. It's another one of those really comfy games for me these days, and it always brings back the childhood nostalgia in such a nice way. It's just one of my favourite games on the Game Boy, and even back then I could tell just how polished this game was. Like, if you think about Bubble Bobble Part 2, it has some really weird VSync issues, which I didn't really understand what they were at the time, but you could see that the screen was tearing. But I thought Kirby's Dream Land was just expertly programmed. Even as a 5-year-old, I knew that there was something special about this game. Now next is a game called Mega Man 2 for the Game Boy. Not the NES one that everyone knows and loves. This one kind of has a mixed reputation, but again, as a kid, I knew no different. I actually knew Mega Man already because I'd played Mega Man 4 on the NES, and I loved that one. And I loved this one just as much as well. But I remember, I don't know which game I swapped, but this wasn't actually mine. This was actually a friend's. And basically I took a game to his house, and I can't remember what it was at this point, but he swapped me for Mega Man 2, and I'm pretty sure I got the better end of the deal there because this game was awesome. And since then I've been back and played all of the other Mega Man games for the Game Boy. I don't own Mega Man 5, at least I don't own a European copy just because it's crazy expensive, but I love all of the Mega Man Game Boy games just as much as I enjoy the NES counterparts, and maybe in the future I'll do a video just about the Game Boy Mega Man series because they're really interesting and really good games in their own right too. Next is an absolute classic for the Game Boy, and probably not the one you were expecting. I know I've talked a lot about Super Mario Land on this channel and how much I love the original game, but that actually came a little bit later in life. The game that I actually played a lot more of as a kid was actually Mario Land 2 6 Golden Coins, and I was a huge fan of Mario World and Mario 3, and this game just felt like an evolution of those games. It has some really weird and interesting power-ups that I just absolutely loved. I loved the world map. I actually think the world map on here is better than the world map in Mario 3 or Mario World. I love how interactive it is, and I love all the weird, wacky locations and themes that you can explore in this game. You can even go into space, or you can go into like the inside of a giant turtle, or you can go into Lego Mario Land, or into the haunted woods, and then of course you've got the castle right in the middle where you fight Wario, and I was always terrified of that stage as a kid, but even so I persevered. And again, just like Kirby's Dream Land, this is a game that I've completed countless times at this point, even though today I actually prefer to go back and play Mario Land 1 over Mario Land 2 just because it's a more straightforward, linear, fast-paced game. I have to give it to Mario Land 2 for nostalgia because this game just oozes charm and nostalgia and just childhood memories that I really do cherish dearly. And of course, another game that I'm sure a lot of people grew up with around the time, of course, Pokemon. I had Pokemon Red as a kid, and my friend had Pokemon Blue, and we both loved playing these. In fact, with this, I didn't actually play it so much on the Game Boy as I actually played it on the TV using the Super Game Boy, and I remember I loved the music in this game so much, and I would just get to a new route and I would just stand in place and I would get out my Talk Boy, which was like a cassette recorder with a microphone that came at the end of it, and I would just record game soundtracks and then play them back later on when I wasn't playing the game. So I'm sure there's a few blank tapes somewhere that have just been filled up with my recordings from Pokemon Red in all the various different locations, and that is such a fun memory of this game, and I have so many great memories of playing the Game Boy on the SNES as well, using the Super Game Boy borders and all the compatibility and stuff too, like drawing your own pictures and changing the colour of the games and things using the Super Game Boy. It was so much fun, and it was great to be able to carry on playing these games that I would play here at my nan and granddad's house, back at home on the TV as well. So it's kind of like what kids experience today with the Switch, I guess, but in a more primitive form factor. Well, we didn't know it was primitive at the time, obviously, but looking back on it, it is a little bit antiquated, and I'm definitely showing my age talking about all these childhood memories with the original Game Boy. I do wonder whether in 20 or 30 years time there'll be people my age on YouTube then talking about how they grew up with the Switch. It will be really interesting to see where YouTubers are that time in the future, and hopefully I'll be sharing my 400,000 subscribers special by then, because I don't plan on going anywhere. No, I am not retiring. The next game is an absolute classic, and I sunk many hours into this one over the years. This is The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, and I've got the original box right here as well, and this was a great game. I remember being really confused as a kid and not really understanding what to do because I didn't really have the patience to speak to all the characters and stuff, but I'm sure there was like guides and strategy guides and magazines and stuff that it could help me get my way through this game. And the reason that this one sticks in my head is because I actually took the Game Boy to school one day when we were doing one of those last day of the year things where you bring in something to play. A lot of kids brought in like spinning tops and things, but I brought in my Game Boy and I spent spent most of that day playing Zelda, and I actually got quite far in it. Me and a few friends were sat at the back of the class trying to go through it and figure our way out through all the dungeons, and I had a great time playing it, and that's just another really nice memory from the time. And the final game that I picked out for my nostalgic section here is kind of a weird one. This is one of these many 50-something in one games, and these were actually, although it says Game Boy Advance on the side, these were actually for the Game Boy as well, and these black cartridges which are compatible with both the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color, but I'll be doing a separate video on the Game Boy Color probably for my 50,000 at this point. But there are some games on here that are really nostalgic to me. I can see on this one there's Boxall 2, and there was another game called Flappy or Fly Pull as well, which were two of the ones that I would always go back to and play on this. And I would actually play them right in this room right here. Whenever I would sleep over at my nan's house, I would be on the floor there on a little pull-out futon made of foam. And I remember next to me was a little nightlight, which was like a little tree house, maybe shaped like a tree or a mushroom or something. And I would angle my Game Boy at that, and I would play it lying on the futon down there on the floor when I was like 8 or 9 years old, and it brings back so many really nice memories, and just seeing this fills me with nostalgia as well. Did anyone else have any of these weird multi-cart games? There was another game on there that I used to play all the time, and that was Dragon Warrior Monsters, but I'm saving that for my Game Boy Color video.